Hello, welcome to the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, John Martin, and tonight I have guests with me, as I usually do, uh, Rob Konesh and Dr. Corbinian.
Thank you, John.
I want to make sure you get that in because he paid a lot for that. Gonna throw it around for the rest of your life.
I'd have to say he's earned that, my friend. He has earned that.
Oh, he had to pay for it. He had to pay for it.
He's
There's money
earned that.
involved, but if you want anything, you have to work for it. It's nothing more than time and effort, and before you know it, it's over. Whatever it be.
Well, the effort tonight, I'm going to start with Rob with gas explosions.
Sure, we'll make it pretty quick here on this, and then we'll get to Charlie's in-depth analysis. I just happened to look on the news tonight. Today, September 13th, about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and I saw that there were a bunch of gas explosions up in Andover, North Andover, and Lawrence or Lowell in that area. And it appeared that 20 or so houses seemed to have been on fire, or they had a gas surge through the gas main that feeds that area, and it wound up having gas in people's houses, and then a spark ignited it. So it's just a great idea for everyone to make sure they know exactly what their shut-off valve is for their gas that comes into their house, and the best one is going to be on the meter itself. I looked at mine right before I came over here. There's a square nut on the top of the meter, so you'll need some sort of locking wrenches to turn that, or a pliers, real tight pliers, and get it on there and turn it righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So it's open now, so you're going to want to turn that to the left, is going to be off. If you ever have that scenario where you need to turn your gas off of your house, it's always a good idea. The other topic I really wanted to talk about quick is that new light at Lake Street. If you're coming past the Stop and Shop exit, going southbound on Lake to Route 9, the new light setup has a left arrow, so you can go east on Route 9. That means when that arrow turns red, for that left lane to stop and not continue on. I've seen 7 or 8 cars in a row sometimes just
Trying to
blow
feed through, yeah.
blow right through it. That's so the other lane can go that's coming towards you. And it's really going to be a dangerous situation until people figure that out completely. I hope the police will monitor that area for a little while until people get used to it. It's been up there for at least almost a month now with the new light pattern, and people are still blowing through there as if it was the way it was previously constructed. That's about all I have on updates right now, but I'm very intrigued to hear about Charlie's.
One quick question,
Yes.
Rob. On these explosions, were any houses totally destroyed?
Yes.
There were.
Yes. Gas got into the house. There's supposed to be an odor in these gases, and there is. The gas comes up with an odorant added into it, so you should be able to smell it
Oh,
within the house.
absolutely. There is a very distinct odor.
But if there's no one home, and the house fills up with gas, which can easily happen, say you left a pilot on, or in this time of year, or you turn the pilot on, the minute you turn some gas on, you have the ignition, and boom, it can go up. So I'm curious to see what they're going to find out in the next couple of days, but there were full evacuations going on in these towns right now. And
Was anybody injured or
they hadn't
killed?
even had the numbers in yet on that, but I would assume there's going to be, some injury.
That's not good.
It's not good. It's not good because it's going to be a catastrophe. And we're sitting here on the eve of another catastrophe spinning off the coast of North and South Carolina. So, my prayers go out to anybody who had family in that region, and hopefully they've evacuated. And because that land area is very low. It goes inland, and it never really comes up more than 11 feet above sea level for a long period of time. So that's one thing about Shrewsbury. We're pretty well
We're
insulated
very fortunate.
against
We're very
anything like that
fortunate.
being in 50, 60 miles from the coast
Right.
and up at about 500 to 700 feet above sea level. So, luckily, that's something to be proud of, that
But
we've chosen this
Even
area.
even where the areas where they're not close to the ocean, they're claiming it could rain up to 30 to 40 inches. where are you gonna put 30 to 40 inches of water? Even if 30 and 40 inches fell around here, we would have some very serious problems.
This is gonna be catastrophic. When they figure out what the final tally is of the destruction of the houses, the businesses, and how long it's gonna take to get,
The infrastructure.
Power, roads.
Yeah.
I mean, they call it the Outer Banks and, the intercoastal for a reason, because it's very low there. And that's separate from the mainland. So though, you can expect that area to be completely devastated. Even if, it's not necessarily gonna be the winds, it's gonna be the amount of
The
flooding
rain.
and
the
raining.
rain. They say the winds have decreased, the winds have now come, maximum winds, they say are gonna be 110 miles an hour, which is not good, but it's not as bad as 130, 140. But the rain, the water's going to be the factor, I think it's gonna cause the most damage.
I mean, it's obviously, in my mind, global warming. It's man-made, so we need to be doing proactive things to calm this atmosphere down, to let it, have a cooling off period. I happen to be at a location the other day, and I see, a WRTA bus just sitting idling with the driver in it for probably a half an hour because they wanted to sit there with air conditioning while they're waiting. There's a 5-minute idling rule for any trucks.
Right.
And that's to prevent atmospheric pollution. And there's so many other things that we could and should be doing to keep our atmosphere in good shape. I mean, they've taken pictures of the ice caps on the South Pole and the North Pole, and
They're getting smaller.
they're getting smaller. They're getting smaller, and huge chunks are falling off, are just dissolving. So we're going to be seeing some interesting developments in the next 50 to 60 years, if not sooner.
You want me to say something, John?
Only if you're prepared for it over there.
Well, back in July, I did a somewhat abbreviated study of superintendent salaries for central Massachusetts, but I restricted it to the 7-town Assabet Valley Collaborative. I reported some of the results where I took superintendent salaries and looked at the enrollment of schools and did some comparisons. I'm not going to go over that. So what I've done since then is I looked at the 44 school districts that were represented in this article that appeared in the Sunday Telegram in sometime in the first 2 Sundays of July. I don't know which one it was. And I did some correlation coefficients, which I explained last time is a computation that gives you a number from -1 to +1. It's going to give you some number. And when the closer to +1 that means that the two variables are strongly related. That is to say, when one gets large, the other is large. When one is small, the other gets small. When it's close to -1, that means that when one is large, the other is small, and when one is small, the other is large. We call that inverse. When you do this correlation coefficient computation, you'll always get a number. But what's important to say is that the number is not always significant. What we're talking about here, what I'm trying to show is that when you have two variables that are statistically significant, when the correlation is significant, that means that there's a possible cause and effect relationship between the two. Only possible. If there is no significant correlation, that means that there is no cause and effect. If we look at the other way, if we know that two variables exist in a cause and effect relationship, we know for sure that their correlation coefficient will be significant. So, having said that, I took for the 44 school districts that were reported in this article, and using the numbers for the superintendent's salaries here, that was for 2018 numbers, and other numbers that I extracted from the computer. I took the salaries and did correlation coefficients of salary versus enrollment, per pupil expenditure, the residential tax rate, SAT reading scores, SAT writing scores, and SAT math scores. Of those, the only one that was significant was the superintendent's salary versus the enrollment of the district. That is to say that when the enrollments were large, the superintendent's salaries tend to be larger, significantly. But all the others, comparing the superintendent's salary with pure pupil expenditure, residential tax rate, SAT reading scores, SAT writing scores, and SAT math scores, there's no correlation, no significant correlation. So therefore, there's no cause and effect there. And this kind of lines up with what I've done for the past 10 to 15 years. I've done a lot of this research as to what impacts learning. And so far, we've come up with all my studies have shown nothing in terms of money. I then took the per pupil expenditure and put that in correlation with the residential tax rate, the SAT reading, the SAT writing, and SAT math scores. None of those were significant.
So basically, let me just make sure I know where you're going with this. Doesn't matter what we're paying the superintendent. These would be the same regardless of his pay.
Right.
Except for the first one that you
Right.
mentioned.
Right.
Okay.
I then took the residential tax rate and compared it with the SAT writing and reading and math. Nothing significant. I took the average teacher salaries and I expanded beyond this article. It made me thinking, what else could I look at? Well, I went to the Massachusetts Department of Education website. I extracted the average teacher salaries for these 44 districts. I did correlation between the average teacher salary and the superintendent's salary, the enrollment of the district, the per pupil expenditure, residential tax rate, SAT reading, SAT writing, and SAT math scores. I found that the teacher salaries and the superintendent's salaries were significantly related. In other words, we found a higher superintendent salary, the average teacher salary was higher. Also significant was the average teacher salary versus the per pupil expenditure, which is to be expected, because what drives your per pupil expenditure is the salaries of the teachers, for the most part, because you've got all these teachers. The others were not significant. And then lastly, I took the SAT math, reading, and writing and did 3 correlations there. All of those were significant. And as a matter of fact, the numbers came out to be for math versus SAT reading was 0.94775. SAT math versus SAT writing was 0.960888. And for reading versus writing was 0.9796. Those are very close to 1. I mean, those are almost perfect positive correlations. Now, does that mean that those two, does one cause the other to happen? There's one case, no. Probably there's other factors involved that why you would see those to be correlated. And I would venture to say it's the student's ability to work, not his ability in terms of his innate ability for the subject, but his commitment to do work that drives things. Having done that, I then started to looking at ranking these numbers. I took the SAT, I took the real estate tax rates, and I ranked them I wrote them down from the largest to the smallest. I found that the average value was $17.23.
You're talking Metro West?
I'm talking about these 44 towns.
44,
okay.
okay.
Same sample. The median was the $17.13. That is the middle score physically, the one that's right in the middle when you put them in descending order. Shrewsbury ranked on the 2nd percentile. The Shrewsbury was at $12.66, our tax rate. It was the last one from the bottom, so to speak. Did the same thing for the school enrollment figures, for the district enrollment figures. The average enrollment was 3,006. The median was 1,807. So it shows you how these scores are really, the center is not the same. Someone always thinks that the median are the same. They're not. This is lopsided, so to speak. And I'm not going to get into that. But Shrewsbury was at the 91st percentile. That alone was 6,214. where they 1, 2, 3, 4 from the top. The average teacher's salary, the average was $71,715. The median was $71,596. So very close. Shrewsbury was at $77,043. So we're above both the median and the median. We are ranking at the 77th percentile. The superintendent's salary for these 44 towns, the average was $164,037. The mean was $163,200. Shrewsbury's salary, superintendent's salary was $190,549, and that ranks on the 76th, and that ranked at the 86th percentile for the superintendent.
That's pretty high.
That's pretty high. His salary was $190,549. I think I reported that on our last program.
Yeah.
I looked at the per pupil expenditure. The average was $13,851. The median was $13,687. Those are pretty close. Shrewsbury ranked at the 41st percentile at the 41st percentile at $13,372. So we're below. But what you're now going to see is something very significant. SAT reading and SAT writing and SAT math. For SAT reading, the average was 502.2. The mean was 506. Shrewsbury was at 543. We are at the 93rd percentile, but our expense is less. So I'm not surprised to see that, because we see that there's no correlation between how much we spend and how well they do. For the writing, the average was 488.06. The median was 488. Those are virtually equal. Shrewsbury was at the 91st percentile with an average score of 543. Then on the SAT math, the average was 502.2. The median was 516. Shrewsbury was at 579. We're at the 93rd percentile on math.
Well, I think these last 3 pages where we're showing very high numbers.
Right. If we're going to accept SAT as a viable, acceptable mean of a way of saying this is how our students are going to, how much they're learning, how much they can do academically, then Shrewsbury is doing very, very well.
But can some of that be attributed to the fact that Shrewsbury has a very high percentage of people from the Far East here?
I don't
And that's why that's skewed up?
I don't know. My gut reaction is I believe when I look at other cultures other than American culture, these cultures seem to be a lot more academically inclined than what we have here. I think in this country, from my perspective, this is my opinion now, and I don't like to give my opinion too often, we are, in American culture, distracted with too many non-academic things going on.
Yeah.
And as a result, our young people are distracted. But I think in the other cultures, that distraction is not as great, because the family say education first, everything else second. And that's how it was in my family.
Yeah. So basically, the people that are focusing on those last 3 categories are getting the most out of the school system.
That's exactly right.
And they're paying, obviously,
Yeah.
some of the least
I
amount of
wish
money
I
in
had
the
a way.
communities.
I wish I had a way of factoring out all the students that are from different cultures out of the Shrewsbury's numbers and seeing what the average of the remaining students would be.
Yep.
I don't have the means of doing that. And this is in no way to incriminate them as being bad people or anything, but just looking at from a point of how much money do we have to spend for students to be successful. And I think that's a question that's always going to be keep on coming up. It has come up every year fault? I can't remember now, since
So-
I've been involved in this.
Basically, families with more discipline and
Yeah.
more focus towards the school systems are reaping the benefits where their children are getting better grades, better scores in math, reading, SATs, and also getting better placements, most likely in colleges
Yes, of course.
because of that too.
Exactly.
Well, we do have one area where they have been doing a lot of testing, and that is the reading and writing capabilities at each grade level, and to find out if they're up to grade level. And they're finding out that those are coming into our school system that don't have English as their first language are failing tremendously. They're considered one of the worst groups that we have in Shrewsbury, because they're teaching everything in English and they're not understanding what's going on because they don't have enough language, English language behind them to do that. And so, and the other one is special education. Well, they in turn, when they start out in special education, are not up to their language level, and they're being taught most of their work in English, which they're not capable of. And so it's sort of double compounding the problem, is that we're trying to teach everybody like they're all Americans speak English. And that's where the strength is with these numbers. The strength of our school system are people that have been here for more than one generation. And that's the, they get more out of the school because they're prepared for the school. And so there's several things they can do. They just recently changed the policy at the state level now, as they're controlling that you can teach whatever language you have to teach in order for the student to catch up. And so that for English language learners, then we need more space, more qualified teachers in different languages to teach these courses for them. And then the other one is they need more special education teachers in order to teach for those that are not understanding the lessons as they go along day to day. Now, having had a boy in special education and had to deal with the school system, and I actually hired consultants to talk to the school system about what it is they were doing. They went and observed, and they actually coached the teachers on how to teach to someone in special education, because they were not considering the fact that they weren't working at the same speed. And I was in there one day when they brought in a special education teacher to stand next to my son, and the teacher started an old lesson, had to finish it. He couldn't find his papers. Guy was not organized. And so they started without him. And then when they give tests, they would compound the knowledge factors, put a whole bunch of them in one question. And that would be their difficult question. Well, guess what? Special ed didn't get any of them. They were too hard. They couldn't remember one part of the problem and another. But so when that was brought to their attention, what they did is they sent the test to special education teachers, and they would break apart the questions so that each knowledge factor could be tested by question. And then when they put it back together again and gave it back to the special education students, they could pass. They were retaining enough so that the question itself wasn't a fumbling block, trying to understand how many things you got in the air. And so when I found that out, I said, this is a little more serious than meets the eye. It's not just the student. It's the teachers that can't adapt to the student. And but once they were showed how to, they did better. And so my son, I got him extra help outside of class because he needed repetition, he needed to build up his vocabulary, and I got people to do that. And the man across from me did it on math for him. He became a very good math student. I was amazed. He was disappointed he didn't get college algebra. He went to college.
He didn't take it.
they didn't offer it.
Oh, they offer.
To be an actor, you don't need to
Okay,
have
okay.
algebra.
That's most
They
unfortunate.
taught him how to, write his checkbook and write checks and balance his counts and stuff like that, which was very good because they didn't do that in high school, which they should.
Right.
And then I think some schools do that, but it's a general course then. It's not specific enough to be academic. So,
One time in high schools, they had a course called business mathematics.
there you go.
In my first year of teaching, I taught a course in business mathematics, and basically, it was like business consumer mathematics, how to do a checkbook, and a variety of a host of things of knowing about when items were on sale, knowing how mortgages work, all these kinds of financial problems, which I thought were very, very good for these people, because these people would have had trouble, did have trouble with algebra. They could not see the concept of variable, fine. But if they applied themselves to these areas, they did very well. But again, no matter what they study, what we've got to understand, it's going to take commitment on their part to be responsible, to be focused, and not be afraid to repeat something until you understand it. And this is the one factor that I find that generally people don't have patience for, is to be repetitive, to learn something. And that's what it takes. I tell you a very quick story that is really non-academic, but it is academic in a sense. There's a jazz piano player called Oscar Peterson. His name is Oscar Peterson. Man's passed away. He is considered to be the master, the guru of all jazz piano players. And I have a tape where they interviewed him, and the interviewer asked him several questions about his life and his playing and so forth. And he asked him, he said, Oscar, he said, do you play every day? And he smiled. He says, I will answer it this way. He says, if I skip one day, when I go back to the piano the following day, my fingers feel like rust. So that shows what it means to do something continually, to keep your game above par. And everything else is the same. Whether we like it or not, it's continuous maintenance. We see it with Tom Brady. In fact, we admire Tom Brady and all those people because they practice for the big game. That's a different arena. That's entertainment. But when it comes to academics, it doesn't float. People can't accept it.
So my last statement,
From my perspective.
which we were talking out in the hallway concerning different things, safety of the schools, have not been approached. I'm going to have that as a future discussion because I think we can do something about it. It's physical, and it's not even academic, but it's something to keep the kids safe. That's going to be a topic for a future show. I've been trying to think, and I'm getting lost here on myself, but we've got 29 seconds. It seems to me we need to consider the fact that the new schools that they're trying to get built now are not going to solve either one of the problems I was talking about tonight. So should we build those schools? No, of course not. It doesn't solve all your problems. They think it sounds like it did, but they're not going to help special education, and they're not going to help English learners. Either one, at any grade level.
This is just a physical structure, yeah.
Well, you got to have more space, more staff. And if you don't have it, good night all.